Welcome to the Top Business Leaders Show, powered by Rise 25 Media. We feature top founders, executives, and business leaders from all over the world.
Chad Franzen here, co-host for this show where we feature top restaurateurs, investors, and business leaders. This is part of our Spot On series. Spot On has the best-in-class payment platform for retail, and they have a flagship solution called Spot On Restaurant where they combine marketing, software, and payments all in one. They've served everyone from larger chains like Dairy Queen and Subway to small mom-and-pop restaurants. To learn more, go to spoton.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. We help B2B businesses to get ROI, clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships through Done for You podcasts. If you have a B2B business and want to build great relationships with clients, referral partners, and thought leaders in your space, there's no better way to do it than through podcasts and content marketing. To learn more, go to rise25media.com or email us at support@rise25media.com. Michael Oshman is the founder and CEO of the Green Restaurant Association, a national nonprofit organization formed in 1990 to create environmental sustainability in the restaurant industry. For over 30 years, he has been the most vocal person on the planet regarding shifting the restaurant industry towards environmental sustainability. Michael has been featured in hundreds of media stories, including Time Magazine, NBC Nightly News, NPR, CNN, Fox News, ABC, The New York Times, and many others. Michael, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
My pleasure. I'm doing well, thank God. And you?
Good, great. Thank you so much. Hey, so tell me a little bit more about the green restaurant industry. It's been around for 30 years. What is its primary purpose and how did it come about?
The Green Restaurant Association was founded in 1990, so it's actually probably 31 years now. And I founded it when I was a college student, second year of college, many years ago. And the mission was exactly what it is today, which is to shift the restaurant industry towards more environmental sustainability. In 7 categories, we have energy, water, waste, disposables, chemicals, food, and building. We have a whole certification program where restaurants can become a level 1, a 2-star, 3-star, 4-star certified green restaurant. And we help them make the actual changes. So they don't have to become experts in sustainable seafood or sustainable food, vegan, vegetarian, this cleaning chemical, energy efficiency. We bring that all to the table as a nonprofit of what is best for your restaurant, not the restaurant next door, not your restaurant 2 years ago, now your restaurant. So we get a baseline of what they're doing. We then make a strategy of what they can be doing based upon how high they want to go. And then we'll work with their recyclers, their landlords, their cleaning chemicals, their disposables vendors. And then once they hit that higher level, we get the verification to demonstrate they actually made those changes. And then they become certified and they can communicate it to the 79% of consumers who prefer dining at certified green restaurants or the 78% of employees who prefer working in a place that matches their values.
We'll get into a little bit more on that in just a minute. But you've met with the President's Council on Environmental Quality under President Clinton and met with the EPA Director under President Obama. How did those meetings go and what were those about?
It was pretty cool. One of them, I was much younger. Under President Clinton, it was a while ago. The Obama one was more recently. I think it was 2015, and they contacted us through a mutual group and wanted to meet at a restaurant to kind of demonstrate some programs they were doing. So we actually had the meeting at one of our certified green restaurants in Boston. And we hosted the director of the EPA there along with 8 or 9 other community leaders. It was a small table of people, maybe 10 people. It was pretty fun. We got them to we got her to wear our certified green restaurant pin. We took her on a tour around the certified green restaurant, showing her exactly what it means. We made specialized signage. It was wonderful, very human, very approachable. You could tell that she's somebody who actually cares about this issue. It wasn't just a political appointee, but somebody who actually cared. And at the time, they were working on some legislation around this. So for me, it was really fun to have the ear of the director of the EPA and also have a view on, environmental change happens in many different ways. It can happen through big sweeping legislation. But I think we all know, there's nothing against legislation, but we all know the winds of politics changes from left to right to middle, and things get done. Sometimes things get undone. And the nice thing about when business does it, they're doing it because they've chosen to do it. Every single certified green restaurant is by choice. Now, they might feel the consumer pressure. They might feel the employee pressure. They might feel the legislative pressure of all these things that are banned. But it's still choice. Nobody's forcing them to do it. And because they've chosen it, it's therefore a decision they think is good for their business. So the nice thing is, regardless of who's president, governor, mayor, they're owning this is how they want their business to be going forward. So that's kind of what we've been about. Is it's not to say legislation is not important, but if we get businesses and consumers wanting to do this, seeing this in their best interest, then it's a much easier game to win than depending upon what the political winds are.
So how do you become a certified green restaurant?
So generally, the restaurants will contact us. We've got restaurants anywhere from like JFK International Airport, Terminal 4, to Harvards and Northeasterns of the world. We've done MetLife Stadium, Super Bowls. We've done Congress. So any restaurant, famous restaurants, small mom and pop, franchisees of big brands, they contact us for some reason. They either care about the issue, they either are realizing it's really good to attract and retain employees, especially now. I'm sure you know there's a pretty big crisis in the industry in terms of getting employees. It's never easy. It's always a big turnover, but especially now. But if you can have a competitive advantage from the employee perspective, consumer perspective, there's something that's compelling them to call us now. And they sign up and they commit anywhere from a year to 5 years. And if all is good, then that gets renewed. We have clients that have been on board for decades. But there's a contract where they're actually committing to becoming a certified green restaurant. We promise them a level of service to have our professional sustainable consulting team and our marketing team support them in making the changes. It's not an 800 number. Everybody knows recycling's good, composting's good, organic's better than pesticides. We're not like giving them a flyer. It's like, Chad, you want to go on a diet? Great. Eat less, exercise more, less cholesterol, less this. Wonderful. I'm a genius. I've just told you how to be healthy, but who doesn't know that? What stops us from making change is individually, but also as businesses, is much more complex than just being told what to do. So we don't sit there and preach and tell them what to do. We do give them the information on what to do, but we also, I think part of why we're here 31 years later is we know how to get over those hurdles of change. Change is hard. Even psychologically, it's hard. It's usually not so hard practically. When we look in retrospect, like, that's all I needed to do. But we're complex human beings. And so we take that pain out. The pain is, I don't know what to do. I don't know, styrofoam, biodegradable, oxygen degradable. Everybody's telling me things are green. I don't know who to believe. Oh, we got this nonprofit, the Green Restaurant Association. They're not selling us anything. They don't care if it's this product or that product. They're agnostic in that way, what their loyalty is to what's best. So there's that trust issue. There's the knowledge issue. There's the question, the pain point of how far do I go? Do I have to be a vegan, organic, solar-powered restaurant before I start marketing myself as a good restaurant, a green restaurant? If you don't have any standards or guidance or certification levels, then it's hard to know how high you need to go. Or conversely, somebody might think, I'm recycling. Woo, I'm the greenest restaurant in the world. But they're not. So by having standards that are objective, the individual standards, but the overall levels, it really makes it easier for them so that when they're marketing themselves, they're not tooting their own horn. We are tooting their horn. And if we get a cynical consumer or somebody saying, well, how can you be green when you're only doing this? We'll say, we've got we have a restaurant on the West Coast that is our greenest restaurant. They're solar powered. They're vegan. They're fantastic. They're really pretty close to what everybody should be doing at least academically to lower their environmental impact. And they're still doing about a sixth of what's possible. So we really communicate to the restaurants, it's not about being perfect. We're going to take where you are, do what you can actually do. We're not telling you to knock down your walls. We're not telling a steakhouse to become, a salad place. We're going to be taking your concept and making it the greenest that it can be. So we do an environmental assessment. Where's your baseline? We work with the vendors for step strategy. We then help you implement it. We then verify it. The restaurant then gets certified. The PR and marketing kick in. We're on dinegreen.com, our website, and various other places, including decals and menus. The marketing kicks in. Then there's a recertification education process that continues year in and year out.
What do you say to people who think it would be too costly to try and become green certified?
It's my favorite question. I have to tell you, I have a stock answer for that. My answer is when I tell them it's too costly not to go green.
How so?
And I don't just mean from some global perspective. Yes, we all know that it's costly environmentally. Most people, realize that more air pollution and asthma isn't a good thing. More reliance on oil isn't a good thing. Conservation and greener energy is a better thing. Most people get that. If you have a restaurant employee, take this green chemical that's going to clean the table, or this one over here that will also clean the table but stinks and is dangerous. Which one do you want to use, 20-year-old employee? I think I'll use the one that isn't potentially dangerous for me. These things are pretty objective when you depoliticize them. So yes, that is all true, but I'm not even talking about on that level. What I'm talking about is on a dollar and cents level, that the restaurant that is saving more energy means their energy bill is lower. The restaurant that's saving more water means their water bill is lower. The restaurant that is recycling and composting and sending that same amount of garbage with the same truck and the same guy driving the truck, but sending it to a composting place or recycling place rather than landfill, that economic model is more sustainable and therefore the waste bills go down. The restaurants doing all of those things are going to be operating in a financially more cost-effective way. So one, opportunity to save money. Two, do you know how expensive it is to train those employees that care? So you might not be able to pay your employee $90 an hour. You probably can't. But it becomes a very cheap investment demonstrating that you care about that 18-year-old, 20-year-old, 22-year-old, 25-year-old employee. Because now you're composting. Well, it's pretty likely a lot of people in that demographic are going to be happy about that. You're recycling. You got rid of your styrofoam. Your energy efficiency, your water efficiency, you're not tooting your own horn. They're walking into work and seeing that certified green restaurant. They did that staff training with the Green Restaurant Association consultant last week, and they're now jazzed up because the restaurant across the street isn't doing this. And the other places they've worked aren't doing this, but you're doing this, and you feel proud that you're part of that restaurant. Consumers are seeing that CNN thing or the NPR thing or the local newspaper thing. So you just got thousands of dollars of free media. Everybody else is scrambling because your city 3 months from now is passing a styrofoam ban or a straws upon request mandate, but you did it a year ago and you were the good guy. Now nobody's the good guy. Everybody's forced to do it. There aren't going to be any stories about it because now it's normal. So when you take all of that, some of which is easy to financially quantify, like energy and water and waste savings, some is harder because of the cost of training and retention. They're real costs, but they're harder to quantify. But the story becomes really clear to most businesses that this is something they need to do it, and doing it with standards, certification, and the benefit that comes with that and expertise is something that it's more costly to be behind the eight ball rather than to demonstrate leadership.
So you talked about this a little bit earlier, your green score. What does your green score tell you? And, is there something you could do to take it from a 3 to a 5 or something like that pretty quickly?
Yeah, so we have 4 different levels. We have level 1, 2-star, 3-star, and 4-star. 4-star, we've got probably about 5% of our restaurants there. So those are like, that's your like 14-year-old kid that goes to Harvard, graduates in 2 years. Like, they exist, but that's not what most restaurants are going to do. That's 4-star. For most restaurants, it's not achievable. 3 stars, believe it or not, the majority of our restaurants are 3 stars. The majority. More than a 2 stars, 4-star, and level 1. Why? Because a lot of our restaurants start at 3-star, but many of them start at level 1. But we have restaurants for many years, and they build up to that. And because 4-star is such a jump, they then hang out in the 3-star area for a long time. So 3 stars is very achievable. Level 1 is a place where we could take, almost any fast food chain that you could think of that you normally would not think of as a green restaurant. We can go in there, help them make certain changes and get level 1. So that's really our certification level that can help the mass of the industry. And then they can move to 2-star and 3-star. So just as an example, the 4-star ones are more likely to have solar or vegan or some sort of big steps. Or it could just be a lot of small energy steps that they've done. Or maybe they contacted us before they built their building or before they did a renovation. So they're getting points for sustainable wood, for sustainable paint, for things that you can't do with a business that's not doing renovation. We're not going to tell them to scrape their paint off. So there literally are opportunities that are only available for renovations and new builds. So that's your 4-star. 3-star, 2-star and 3-star are going to have a much more well-rounded group of steps in energy, water, waste, disposables, chemicals, and food. That's 2 and 3 stars. It's going to be dispersed around there. Level 1, you might have restaurants making changes in 3 or 4 categories. So it might be more top heavy in 3 or 4 and not as dispersed. So it really ranges quite a bit. But some of the steps are LED lighting, very accessible. Aerators, switching out a $3 aerator is like, it saves thousands of dollars. It's really like restaurant industry could save millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars doing almost zero investment steps. Aerators, spray valves, LED. An easy step for most restaurants is adding a couple menus low on the food chain. If I say, have you heard of Impossible Burger? Have you heard of Beyond Meat? These are brands. Burger King has the Impossible Burger. 10 years ago, if you said Burger King's going to have a vegan burger, somebody would have looked at me and said, okay, good luck. I'm glad this guy's really idealistic. But now we see that this is penetrating the mainstream because these things taste good. And there's enough vegans and vegetarians and people who are wanting to eat heart healthy who aren't vegetarians or vegans, but they want to go and have a burger and it tastes good enough. So adding a couple menu items that are low in the food chain vegan, it's easy. There's no financial investment. It actually attracts more customers. We've had a steakhouse who said to me years ago, like a very mainstream, well-known steakhouse, said to me, I was speaking to the owner, and in that conversation, this person said, I don't think we're going to go vegan. I said, we're not trying to convince you to go vegan, but we might try to help you have a couple organic steak items. We might work with you to have the steak eater who wants to come to your place might have a spouse who's vegan or vegetarian, doesn't like steak or has heart issues. Don't you want them to come to your restaurant? If you only have steak, you've lost out. They're not going there. They're going to the other steak place or burger place where the one spouse can get the salad and one can get the steak. So by having some real menu items, not just salads, but a real menu item that somebody wants to go to can attract more customers. So even just adding a couple vegan, vegetarian menu items is something that gets a lot of points in our system because the environmental impact of something low on the food chain is much more beneficial.
From kind of a generic customer standpoint, just somebody who's it's Friday night or whatever and wants to go out to eat, why would it be a benefit to go? I mean, beyond kind of in the back of your mind knowing it's a green certified restaurant and that's good for the planet, but why would that be a good experience for me as just a kind of a general person?
Absolutely. So Chad, what I would say to you is almost the same question, almost the same answer as the concern of, isn't it more costly to go green? And I switch it around saying, no, it's more costly not to go green. So kind of a similar answer there, which is, why would somebody go to a certified green restaurant? My answer is, why wouldn't they? Because, Chad, if I could tell you, let's say you like pizza and you live in New York, and I could tell you there's 5 different pretty good pizza places within a 3-minute walk. And there probably are wherever you live in New York, in Manhattan. Okay, fine. So you're going to go to this place or that place or this place. Maybe you like this place a little more. Maybe they're all pretty good and you spread out your business. If I could say to you, hey, Chad, one of them just became a certified green restaurant. You can now have that pizza that you like, and they're putting out less water pollution, less air pollution. It's better for your community. If you are one of the many Americans who cares about environmental issues and climate change, you're doing nothing. You're not spending $18. You're not spending $50. You're not spending $100 donating to Sierra Club. We're not asking you to sell your car. You're going out for pizza. You're making no sacrifice. All you're doing is choosing a certified green restaurant. And by doing that, you are literally having a lower impact, because the likelihood that their napkin, their paper towel, their toilet paper, their toilet, their sink, their spray valve, their lighting, the cleaning chemicals, where your stuff is going, not to the landfill, but recycling, composting, and the likelihood that the negative impact of what you're doing is going to be much less, the positive impact is going to be much greater. So if I could tell you, Chad, go have that pizza, spend the same exact money, enjoy the meal, and see that decal on the front, feel actually a little good. You didn't just serve your belly and have a good time. You actually did something good. Most consumers are going to be like, wow, I spent the same money, I enjoyed my meal, and without making a donation, I actually did something good for the world. Most people are going to be more likely to go back to that place.
You talked about the negative effect that COVID has had on the restaurant industry. Has it affected your association at all?
Oh my gosh, yes, very much. Anybody in the restaurant industry, I don't know what part of the restaurant industry wouldn't answer that way. There might be an exception somewhere, but yes, this industry has been ravaged. The amount of restaurants closed permanently, the restaurants that are closed, but they're just hanging on, the back and forth. And this isn't a criticism on government policy. It's just difficult. It's difficult for restaurants. I understand why the policies exist. They're so different from state to state, city to city, but the practical effect is very difficult. It's been very difficult on and off. And having said that, the first year of the pandemic, plus or minus, been a little bit of a blur, plus or minus, we did a lot of internal projects to strengthen our organization and really make our systems more efficient, because most restaurants didn't want to speak with us. Thankfully, over the past year, things have picked up. The past 6 months has, I would say, I'm hesitant to use the word normal, but our consulting team is right now back to normal in terms of servicing clients full time. So we'll see what happens, but it's been a challenge, but thankfully we've weathered it. And the nice thing is, I think the industry and consumers in the world sees that, sustainability is not a trend. I've been saying that for years. It's not a diet fad. It's not a diet fad that's going to be replaced with the next diet fad. It is something that is all too real, and the issues are becoming bigger, not smaller. The amount of people that are buying into it and becoming interested in it are more. The younger generation is getting older and becoming decision makers. And so all the statistics demonstrate that this is far from a trend, and all the more so, you have the Whole Foods of the world, you have the Teslas of the world, you have all the electric car companies and mainstream car companies, you've got the vegan meat companies, you've got billions, hundreds of billions of dollars of an industry that's called green business industry. When I started this 31 years ago, it's barely millions, if that. So, anybody who really looks at business objectively, including socially responsible investing, sees this is going nowhere. And the only thing to do is really to jump on and to figure out what level people want to go to.
What drove you to start this 31 years ago? You said you were a college student. Were you working in a restaurant at the time, or what made you decide to do this? And second part, did you ever think that 30 years later, you'd still be doing that would be your job?
I'll start with the second question of did I think it'd be 30 years later? I remember sitting at not an alcohol bar, but like it was like a diner. It was like a breakfast place. And they had like the stools where you sit up, and the owner was behind there in the little kitchen area. And this was in San Diego where I started the organization. And I remember him saying, he was a nice guy. He really wanted to do this, but he saw this I don't know. I started when I was 19, but we got our first restaurants on board maybe when I was 21. And legitimately, he looked at me, he's like, how do I know you're going to be here in 6 months or a year? Come on. I was 21. This could have been just an exciting idea. And the next year I would have been in law school or whatever. He legitimately questioned, this is a risky investment because this guy is so young. And I said to him, you don't. But if you knew me, then you would know that I will be here. But there's nothing I could say to demonstrate that except that my personality and level of commitment is that if I'm doing this, then I'm going to follow through on it. So did I think at that point it'd be 31 years? No, I was thinking a year or 2 or 3, I could assure you. But when I started it, I didn't start it to be a year or 2 or 3. I started this organization to fundamentally shift the world in the same way that cars need to be shifted over to electric and energy needs to be shifted over to solar. The restaurant industry needs to integrate all of those and become more sustainable. The restaurant industry could have been anything. It could have been, electric cars. It could have been solar. It could have been organic agriculture. I picked this industry because it includes energy, water, waste. It's a wonderful leverage point to really change business on a large perspective. And versus a car company, and I used to say this in interviews at the time, of, well, why am I not lobbying GM? Why am I not doing this? Because they wouldn't listen to me at the time. And I wasn't an engineer like Elon Musk, who was about to go create my own car, or actually other people created the car and he came in a little bit later. But what I knew was that this industry was highly dependent on consumers. And that goes to your first question, which is, the reason why I did this, the reason why I created this organization is that consumers have a lot of influence in the restaurant industry. Even a McDonald's franchisee has only a certain amount of consumers. And for that one particular franchisee, any restaurant is completely dependent upon its X amount of customers that come in. And therefore, from a voting block, you don't need a lot of consumers communicating their interests to influence businesses. You don't need a lot of employees. It's not a behemoth of an industry. It is a huge industry. It's huge. The amount of employees, I think it's 10% of the workforce, something like that. It's anywhere from 4 to 10% of the economic impact of the economy. It's huge on many levels. But it's made up of a million small pieces. There's 1 million or so restaurants in the US. So that was a big reason why I chose the restaurant industry. I wasn't running a restaurant at the time. A couple years later, I ran a restaurant, but I really came from the consumer perspective. I really loved going out to eat. I was already aware of environmental issues at the time. I had already made my own changes around the packaging I was going to use and frustrated by my own impact. And I really thought, in order for change to happen, there needs to be a systemic, easy way for it to happen. It can't just be individuals making individual choices. It has to be that also. But you can't have individuals making choices if they don't know what choice to make. What restaurant should I go to? If I don't know which apple is organic or not, which apple should I buy? Unless there's certifications guiding you as to what the better decision is, then you have to be a PhD consumer in 9 different fields, and that's not fair to the consumer. So when you go out to a restaurant, there should be an easy way for you to make the choice, and that's why we chose the restaurant industry as influenced by the consumer, and it leverages many environmental issues.
How long did it take you to kind of build up to where you had, where you were dealing with a number of clients or a number of restaurants and helping them out, especially somebody that young?
It took a while. It took a crazy amount of persistence and patience because we didn't get seed funding. When we went for funding in the beginning, funding in the nonprofit sector was generally geared towards lobbying for legislation or education. We didn't fit in. Now we fit in a lot more. Thankfully, the nonprofit world has shifted. But at the time, there were few to no other organizations doing what we're doing, which is when we go to funders, like, no, we don't want to educate people on recycling. We actually want to go in and help people recycle because we think the facts on the ground and actually making real change will pull much stronger levers on our capitalist system than just giving a bunch of education with people actually not having the tools to do it. So at the time, we didn't get the funding. So thankfully, we were a bootstrap organization and we built up slowly, and there's really a lot of benefits to that. We have very dispersed funding. We're funded by our restaurants, so it's very dispersed. It's diverse. Therefore, when you have a pandemic or a 2008 recession, we've got lots of legs to walk on, and we were able to weather those storms. So it took many years. It wasn't until 2006, 16 years into our organization, that Al Gore put out his movie called The Inconvenient Truth, which is, I would say, a watershed of a moment in the United States where a lot of people who were in the mainstream who really weren't looking at environmental issues saw the movie and woke up that something needs to happen. Didn't necessarily know what to do because, it wasn't a fully prescriptive movie, but made a case that a lot of thinking people thought, wow, this is maybe society, we need to do something. So we started getting calls from a lot of mainstream restaurants at the time. There was a shift at that time. 2006 was definitely a demonstrable shift from small organizations saying the same thing over and over again to, now a lot of the industry thinks they should do it. Who are they coming to? That organization that's been doing this. There was a small point in the industry where some actors from the industry thought that they can just do it illegitimately. We'll put on our own sticker. We'll say we're green. And then people realize this term greenwashing, it doesn't really work. Because consumers really want something real. Just like when you go into the market, if you're gonna buy something vegan, you want to know it's vegan. If you're gonna buy something organic, you want to know it's organic. Not the guy at the store told you it was. Not the guy at the store told you he thinks there's no meat or eggs in that veggie burger. You want to know. And so industry really woke up to there's no lying your way out of this. You got to do this. And that's really what the past 15 years has been about, is the industry's been coming on board, I would say faster than the previous 15 years, not fast enough. But we're definitely, I would say, going from a place where we used to need to convince restaurants that this was an important thing to spending much less time doing that. And instead, we go right to action and strategy. So that's really gratifying. Having said that, it'll be gratifying when these issues are dealt with, and the idea of recycling and composting is not a novelty. The idea of having clean energy and conservation is not a novelty. So we're much further along. And the nice thing is, if the graph was like this and started going like this, or for those who can't, or on audio, it's getting a steeper incline in terms of the adoption.
I can tell, it's been 31 years, yet you're still incredibly passionate about it. Like you just started it yesterday. What keeps you going like that?
I would say a couple things. One, just on a personal level, and I speak to students and speak to people not necessarily interested in this, but just pursuing their passions. And one of the things that I encourage people to do is to make sure that they're taking care of themselves, because if you want to make change, you better be in it for the long haul. It's not a movie. It doesn't end in an hour and a half. Change in life, whether it's personal, whether it's organizational, takes time, takes commitment, takes perseverance. There's ups and there's downs. So the one thing of why I'm so passionate 31 years later is because I don't resent doing this. I feel very grateful that I get to do something that I'm passionate about, and that I've seen the impact. I've seen, wow, a Super Bowl. Wow, cool. Okay, great. Congress. Wow, Harvard. Wow, American Express. This is great. Things are getting adopted. That famous restaurant, this city government. We just got our first thing with the utility, who's mandating in their area a certain amount of restaurants to become certified green restaurant. The utility is, not mandating. They're giving funds for a certain amount of restaurants going certified. They're going to pay for a certain amount of their restaurants. That's never happened before. So part of it is I see things moving. It'd be very difficult if there was no movement, but I've seen movement. That's one thing. And the other piece is I have, I think, a very realistic idea. As idealistic as I am, as idealistic as I was, I'm very pragmatic. And to make change, if you look at any movement, the civil rights movement, the movement for women to get a vote, we have those moments that we see in the movies of that speech. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech is what we remember, and he did phenomenal work. But there were people before him and people after him. And not everything is a fantastic speech. It's a lot of hard work by people individually. Movements take decades, sometimes a century or so. So I hope it doesn't take a century for this. But I had a realistic view that this is going to take a long time. And it's really gratifying to see, electric vehicles in my lifetime in the next few years are likely to flip in terms of being the exception to the mainstream. I've seen it with solar. So it's really also gratifying to see that this vision is being adopted. The world is changing in this way. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. One more question for you, but first, how can people find out more about the Green Restaurant Association?
The best way is to go to our website, dinegreen.com, DINEGREEN.com. That's the website for the Green Restaurant Association. There they can find certified green restaurants through a search, through their state, through certification levels. If they're a restaurant, they can find out how to get help from us. If they're a student at a culinary school, they can find educational resources or employee accreditation systems. So it's a great website to become educated by. And we encourage all the consumers out there spending about half their food budget dining out, if not exclusively using this when they're dining out, to use it as a guide, that if they want to go for Chinese food that night and there is one in that area they want to go to, we encourage them to use this as a guide.
My final question, what are some books or podcasts that you have found particularly valuable or enjoyable?
It's interesting. When I started this, there weren't MBAs. There were books like Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. There were kind of large call to actions. So what I relied on a lot more were people, live people to serve as inspiration. I had a great inspiration of a friend of mine, Joel Trachtenberg, who's still on our board, who really woke me up to these environmental issues when I was just a teen. There was somebody who ran for mayor in San Diego who had been in environmental issues. He makes me look like a Johnny come lately. He was doing this 20, 30 years before me, and he really spoke the language of green business, not pulling on people's heartstrings, but demonstrating that this makes sense. And when we get to the cost per kilowatt of solar, then this is going to happen. He spoke dollars and cents and energy. So that's really what I've tried to fill myself with, is inspiring people who don't just inspire my heart, but really help me have a language to make this happen. I read a lot, mostly articles, etc. Our organization does a lot of research in these issues. But what I have to say, which is probably counterintuitive to your listeners and viewers, is when there becomes that new study demonstrating that the issue is even worse than we thought, I'll read a little bit of that article, but I probably won't read the whole thing. Why? I'm about as convinced as you're going to get. I don't need more bad news. If you have an article about a dishwasher that's more energy efficient, or some great system an entrepreneur came up with of how to have the convenience of disposables, but with reusables, I'm going to read that whole article. I'm going to read it quickly. I'm going to talk to the owners of those companies. I'm going to see how we can integrate them and get them into the restaurant industry. But that's also an important thing that, ask me about the longevity, is you've got to balance hearing the bad news with the good news. Because if you read too much information, and please don't take this as Michael Oshman said, don't read, read, get educated. Just choose what you're getting educated by. Balance it. Balance your education of things that are solutions-based, and also know yourself of how much you can take. Because human beings are emotional beings. And if we read bad news all day, bad scientific reports, and things are worse and worse and worse, is that going to get you to act more? If it is, read it. But if you only reading half that information is enough for you to feel the sting, then read half that information and spend your other half actually doing action. So that's my little advice of how much to take in.
Okay. Hey, it's been so great to talk to you, Michael. I really appreciate your time. And we will encourage everybody to go to your website, dinegreen.com. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Chad.
So long, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Top Business Leaders Show, powered by Rise 25. Visit rise25.com to check out more episodes of the show and to learn more about how you can start your own podcast.